The Spanish Civil War, 1936–1939, stands as one of the most complex, brutal, and ideologically charged conflicts of the 20th century. Join us as we uncover the multiple layers of ideology, political ambition, and international power plays that transformed a national struggle into a proxy war. Through this journey, we will gain insight into how the Spanish Civil War not only reshaped Spain but also set the stage for the ideological battles of the coming global war. Background and context. Before the outbreak of the Civil War, Spain was a country riven by deep social, economic, and political divisions. The early 20th century had seen Spain grapple with the decline of its colonial empire, rising unemployment, and a growing gap between rich and poor. The fall of the monarchy in 1931 and the establishment of the Second Spanish Republic brought hope to many who longed for reform, but it also exposed the fault lines of Spanish society. In the years following the proclamation of the Republic, sweeping reforms were introduced. Land redistribution, educational reforms, and attempts to modernize the economy were met with fierce resistance by traditional power structures such as the church, the military, and large landowners. The struggle in Spain was not just a battle over governance, it was a fight over ideas. On one side stood the Republicans, a coalition that included socialists, communists, anarchists, and liberal Democrats, who championed progressive reforms, secularism, and the empowerment of workers and peasants. On the other side were the Nationalists, a heterogeneous group led by military officers and right-wing politicians, united in their opposition to what they saw as the excesses of the Republic. For many conservatives, the war was a fight to preserve traditional values, the influence of the Catholic Church, and the established social order. As tensions escalated, these ideological differences turned violent. Political assassinations, street battles, and retaliatory acts became increasingly common, setting the stage for an all-out war that would eventually engulf the nation. Causes of the war. At the heart of the Spanish Civil War lay deep-rooted socio-economic inequalities. Large estates controlled by the aristocracy and the church coexisted with widespread poverty among the rural peasantry and urban workers. The demand for land reform and fair distribution of wealth had been simmering for decades, and the new republic's attempts to address these issues only fueled opposition among those who benefited from the status quo. The rapid political changes during the Second Republic intensified polarization. As different factions emerged, compromise became impossible. Radical elements on both the left and the right adopted uncompromising stances. The political center was eroded, leaving a vacuum that extremist ideologies quickly filled. The failure to reconcile these opposing visions of Spain's future set the stage for a conflict that was as much about ideology as it was about power. The Spanish military, traditionally seen as a guardian of national unity, found itself divided. Many officers resented the Republic's attempts to diminish military power and undermine traditional hierarchies. This resentment would later crystallize into a military uprising led by figures like General Franco and other conservative generals. The military coup, which began in July 1936, was both a symptom and a catalyst of the growing divisions within Spanish society. Major factions and key players. The Republican faction was a broad alliance, ranging from moderate liberals to radical leftists. They were united by the belief that Spain needed profound social and political reforms. The Republicans sought to implement policies that would establish secularism, empower workers and peasants, and modernize the economy. Intellectuals, artists, and educators largely supported the Republican cause, which they saw as a beacon of progress in a rapidly changing world. Leaders within the Republican camp varied in their ideologies and strategies. Some advocated for peaceful, gradual change, while others, influenced by Marxist and anarchist ideas, believed that only a radical transformation of society could deliver true justice and equality. This internal diversity, while a strength in terms of popular support, also proved to be a weakness, as infighting and disagreements over strategy hindered the Republicans' ability to present a unified front against the Nationalists. Opposing the Republicans were the Nationalists, a coalition of conservatives, monarchists, and fascist sympathizers. Under the leadership of General Franco and other military commanders, the Nationalists aimed to restore order and preserve traditional values. Their ranks included influential members of the Catholic Church, landowners, and businessmen who feared that the radical reforms proposed by the Republicans would lead to chaos and the loss of their privileged positions. The Nationalists were able to garner support from segments of the population that were alarmed by the rapid social changes occurring in Spain. They promised to restore stability, protect the church, and reassert Spanish traditions. Their vision of Spain was one rooted in hierarchy, discipline, and a return to the conservative order that had long defined Spanish society. International involvement. The Spanish Civil War quickly evolved into more than just a national conflict. It became a proxy war that attracted international attention. The ideological battle between the Republicans and Nationalists resonated with broader global struggles. For many on the left, the war was seen as a fight against fascism, while conservatives and authoritarian regimes viewed it as a bulwark against the spread of communism and radicalism. Perhaps the most notorious examples of foreign intervention came from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini saw the Spanish Civil War as an opportunity to expand their influence, test new military strategies, and promote their fascist ideologies. For Hitler, involvement in Spain was a chance to forge an alliance with like-minded authoritarian regimes and to destabilize a country that had become a symbol of leftist revolution. The Nazi regime provided crucial military support, including aircraft, tanks, and ground troops, to the Nationalists. This support was not only a demonstration of German military might but also a prelude to the larger conflict that would soon engulf Europe. Mussolini, too, was eager to assert Italian power on the international stage. Fascist Italy's involvement was driven by a desire to create a sphere of influence in the Mediterranean and to support a regime that promised to restore order and tradition. Italian forces, though not as numerous as their German counterparts, played a significant role in bolstering the nationalist cause. The intervention of Hitler and Mussolini was driven by multiple factors: ideological affinity with the Nationalists, the strategic advantage of weakening potential adversaries, and the opportunity to experiment with new forms of warfare. Their involvement turned the Spanish Civil War into a testing ground for tactics and technology that would later be seen on the battlefields of World War II. On the other side of the conflict, the Soviet Union provided support to the Republicans. Eager to counter the rising tide of fascism, Moscow sent weapons, advisors, and even military personnel to assist the Republican forces. Additionally, thousands of international volunteers, organized into the International Brigades, crossed borders to join the fight against fascism. These volunteers came from across the globe, Europe, North America, and beyond, and were united by a commitment to defend democracy and social justice. The support provided by the Soviet Union and the international volunteers helped to galvanize the Republican resistance, even as they struggled to overcome internal divisions and the overwhelming might of the nationalist forces bolstered by German and Italian aid. Key battles and events. The Spanish Civil War erupted in July 1936, when a group of nationalist officers launched a coup against the Republican government. What began as a series of military uprisings quickly escalated into a full-blown civil war as regions across Spain declared their loyalties. In some areas, the coup was met with fierce resistance by local militias and workers' collectives, while in others, the nationalist forces moved swiftly to seize control. The chaotic early days of the conflict set the tone for what was to come. Violence erupted in the streets as communities were torn apart by suspicion and ideological fervor. The rapid escalation of hostilities made it clear that Spain was entering a period of prolonged and devastating conflict. One of the most iconic episodes of the war was the Siege of Madrid. As the capital and a symbol of Republican resistance, Madrid became the focal point of both propaganda and military strategy. Nationalist forces launched several assaults on the city, determined to crush the Republican stronghold. However, the resolute defense mounted by the Republican troops and the civilian population transformed Madrid into a symbol of defiance. As news of the conflict spread, thousands of volunteers from around the world, politicians, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens alike, decided to join the fight against fascism. These international brigades, composed of volunteers from over 50 countries, arrived in Spain with little more than ideological fervor and a determination to stop the spread of authoritarianism. The international brigades played a crucial role in bolstering the Republican forces. Although they often faced language barriers, harsh conditions, and internal political disputes, their commitment underscored the international dimension of the struggle. They symbolized the hope that ordinary people from around the world could come together to resist tyranny. Perhaps the longest and most costly campaign was the Battle of the Ebro, which raged from July to November 1938. This battle, fought along the banks of the Ebro River, was a desperate bid by the Republicans to turn the tide of the war. Although initially successful, the offensive ultimately failed, resulting in massive casualties and hastening the decline of the Republican resistance. The involvement of Hitler and Mussolini, motivations and impact. For both Hitler and Mussolini, the Spanish Civil War was more than a distant conflict. It was a battleground where fascist ideologies could be tested and advanced. The nationalist cause in Spain, with its emphasis on traditional values, authoritarianism, and anti-communism, resonated deeply with the fascist regimes in Germany and Italy. Supporting General Franco and his allies was not only a strategic move but also a demonstration of ideological solidarity. The involvement of German and Italian forces provided the nationalists with advanced weaponry, aircraft, and tanks, dramatically altering the balance of power on the battlefield. These interventions were designed to be both a practical assistance to Franco's forces and a propaganda tool that showcased the might of the fascist powers. Both Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy saw in Spain an opportunity to experiment with new military tactics and equipment. The Spanish Civil War became a real-life laboratory for the development of blitzkrieg tactics, coordinated air-ground assaults, and the use of combined arms operations. German pilots, such as those from the infamous Condor Legion, gained invaluable combat experience that would later prove decisive during World War II. Likewise, Italian forces tested their own military innovations, hoping to refine strategies that could enhance their influence in the Mediterranean region. Beyond military experimentation, the intervention of Hitler and Mussolini was also driven by clear political objectives. By supporting the nationalists, both dictators aimed to prevent the spread of communism and socialism in Western Europe. The Republican forces, bolstered by leftist ideologies and supported by the Soviet Union, represented a direct challenge to the fascist vision of society. For Hitler and Mussolini, ensuring a fascist victory in Spain was a means of securing a friendly regime on Europe's southwestern flank, a strategic advantage that could potentially shift the balance of power in their favor. Their involvement was a calculated risk. By deepening Spain's internal divisions and provoking an international conflict, they hoped to create a new order in Europe that aligned with their own expansionist and ideological goals. The human cost and the legacy of the war. The Spanish Civil War was not only a political and military struggle, it was also a human tragedy. Over the course of the conflict, hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives, and countless more suffered the devastating consequences of a war that tore communities apart. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, and atrocities were committed on both sides. The brutality of the conflict left scars that would take decades to heal. The war saw widespread acts of repression, mass executions, and the targeting of intellectuals, artists, and political dissidents. The social fabric of Spain was irreparably damaged, and the divisions sown during these years continued to influence Spanish society long after the conflict ended. The victory of the nationalists under Franco led to a prolonged dictatorship that would last until 1975. Under Franco's rule, Spain experienced political repression, censorship, and a reversal of many of the progressive reforms attempted by the Second Republic. The memory of the war became a contentious topic, and the process of reconciliation and historical memory has been a challenging journey for the country. The Spanish Civil War remains one of the most compelling and tragic conflicts of modern history. It was a war that pitted ideologies against each other in a struggle that would ultimately redefine Spain and signal the coming of a global conflict. The internal divisions within Spain, combined with the heavy hand of international intervention, created a perfect storm that plunged the nation into years of bloodshed and suffering. If this exploration into the depths of the Spanish Civil War has intrigued you, please like, share, and subscribe to History Facts and Mysteries. By revisiting these pivotal moments in history, we not only honor the memory of those who fought and suffered but also learn lessons that are as vital today as they were decades ago.